friends, it's Christy. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be bringing you another installment in my Copic favorite series, and we are going to be coloring some woodland critters. I'll be using two sets from Hello Bluebird, Leaf Play and Dear Friend, and we're going to be coloring a deer, a fox, a bear, a hedgehog, a mole, a bunny, and a bird. So my most favorite combination for coloring the hide of a deer is E33, E35, and E37. So I'm going to break him down into sections since he is a larger image, and that way the ink will stay wet longer and I'll be able to get a better blend. So I laid in that E37 first as my shadow, the E35 is my mid-tone, and then the E33 is my highlight shade, which I put in the center of his forehead. I find that this color combo is really true to the actual deer hide. It's a little bit more of a russet brown combo. It's not too dark, but it's not too light. And this is just based on the markers that I personally own. I do own about half of the Copic markers, and I do have a lot of browns because browns are so versatile when it comes to coloring critters, which are my favorite thing to color. So I do have quite a lot of the browns, and of all of them, this is definitely my favorite for deer. So in case you've missed it, this is actually the fourth video in my Copic favorite series. In the first video, we talked about the different tools that you'll need to color with Copic markers, including what paper I recommend. In the second video, we talked about inks, and I gave my most recommended colors in rainbow order and a few basics as well. And then in my third video, we talked about marker maintenance and how to refill your Copic markers. So I'll have that entire playlist linked in the cards in the top right corner there. I did add in the E31 when I got down toward the belly because I just wanted it to be a softer hue. Often the deer have a little bit of a lighter belly or even a white belly. If you wanted to leave it white, you could do that too. But the E31 is going to help with transitioning to get there. I also wanted to mention that I am coloring all of my images at least twice. I just prefer the look of having a double layer on my critters. I think the markers get so much more vibrant and intense, and it's just how I prefer to color, but I'm not going to include that in the video because this would get really long. But I definitely go over my images at least twice, and with the deer I actually went over him 3 times because he was so large and I just wanted to smooth out those transitions. So for his white areas, I'm using E000 and E00. I laid in the E00 first and then added the E000 and let that fade off into the white, and then I will grab my colorless blender and just go over the transition so that it fades softly. For his antlers, I'm using E50 and E51. I think this is a really good shade for any kind of bones. I would also do dog bones in these shades, or a skull, or anything like that. For the hooves, I'm using E44 and E47. That E47 is one of my darkest brown markers, so it almost looks black, but it just has a little bit more life to it to me. I'm moving on to my hedgehog, and for him I'm going to go back to that E50 and E51, but I'm going to add in the E53 just to add a bit more depth to his skin tone. So I'm laying in those shadows first with the E53, and then I'm going to blend that out with the E51 next, and then I'll finish on his belly and face with the E50. I always like to keep my critters nice and light on their faces so you can really see their facial features, which gives them their personality. So with this video, we are starting the breakdown of my favorite Copic combos into the different categories. So there's going to be different critters and skin tones and hair tones and foliage. But it was just such a daunting task to try to accommodate all of those things, even in a breakdown, because think about how many critters there are in the world. There's just so many different kinds. Even if it's just woodland critters, there's lots more that I didn't include in today's video. We'll get to another day. There's squirrels and skunks and owls and just all kinds of things. So there's no way to really squeeze them all into one video, and I had been putting a lot of pressure on myself to try to do that, and that's why it took so long to come out with a new video. But I think breaking it down into smaller bites is going to make it more manageable for me and hopefully more manageable for you to follow along and build your Copic collection. So for the Hedges Spikes, I used E55, E57, and E59. And then I put a little YR000 on the inside of his ears. I'm going to use that shade with YR00 and YR01 for the mole's skin. So I just wanted something that was kind of soft and pinky, but I feel like these YR shades are just a little bit more realistic looking than like an actual pink. It's just a little bit more of a natural shade to me for critters. So I use those 3 shades for him, and then for the rest of the critters I'm going to do the insides of their ears with just those lighter 2 shades, the YR00 first, and then I'll also add a little of the YR000 to blend that out. I'm also going to go back and add a bit more of the YR00 to the Hedgie and the deer, just so that they are a little bit brighter. And for the rest of the mole, I'm going to start with E74, E77, and E79. So the first thing I'm going to do is take that E79 and I'm going to lay in some shadow on the underside of his arm and along his back. I'm going to accentuate the curve of his thigh there and also bring that color up onto the back of his head. And I'm being pretty sparing with these darker colors because I don't want him to get too dark, but I definitely love a lot of contrast in my coloring. So I definitely need that depth so that the lights, will look light. So I blended that out with the E77, and then I'm going to bring in the E74. I'm going to finish up his arms with those shades and bring that color up around his thigh and color in his tail. I'll bring that color forward on his head as well. But when I get to his head and belly, just as I mentioned before, I like to keep those areas nice and soft. So I'm going to bring in the E70 and E71 for those. So I'll first use that E71 to pull forward that transition shade and just leave a lot of white area still for that lightest, the E70. And I'm going to just softly flick that color into the YR tones that I put on his nose so that I have a nice blend there as well. And then I pulled in the E79 for his nose. I'm going to color the bunny with W00 and W1, and I'll end up bringing in the W3 as well because it just wasn't enough contrast for me. Now for this, I would not necessarily say that this is my favorite way to color bunnies, but it is a very common way to color bunnies. Bunnies are one of my absolute favorite critters to color because they just come in so many different varieties. You can do white, you can do gray, black, brown, all kinds of shades of brown. You can add dots and spots and little stripes down their backs, which I love to do. But for this video, I thought I would keep it more simple for you guys. But I have lots of other videos on my channel where I color bunnies just because I love them so much. And I will link up in the cards here one that has bunnies in 3 different ways, just to give you guys some different ideas if you're interested in going beyond just the basic white or gray bunny. And for his nose, I just went back to my YR01 and just dotted that in. Okay, so bears are another critter where there are lots of different options and different color choices you could go with. There's black bears, brown bears, grizzly bears, panda bears, polar bears, all different types. But this is just a basic combo that I really find works well and I think looks really nice for bears. So it's E42, E43, and E44. So if you are making a card where you're coloring a whole bunch of critters and you're not sure where on the card you want them to go yet, or maybe you don't even have a card idea in mind, you just want to color a bunch of things and you don't know where to put your light source, I always tend to put it on the back of their bodies and keep their faces and bellies nice and light, like I mentioned earlier. So I will always put my shadow down the back of the body and on the underside of the arms, because the underside would not be getting as much light. Also the backs of the legs. And if it's a critter with 4 legs, such as the deer, I will always put a deeper shadow on the leg that's on the opposite side of the body. So there would be more shadow there because it's further from the view and also further from the light source. You can also get different looks and different texture by the way that you color with your markers. So I recently did a card with a goat that I wanted to look shaggy. So I did a lot of flicking motions up from the belly to make the fur look like that. For this bear, I want him to look fuzzy. So I'm doing little circular motions to kind of just break up that color and get that nice and soft. And I did add in the E41 as well on his face and belly. My favorite combo to color foxes is YR12, YR14, and YR18. Now if you watch some of my older videos, I often used YR04, YR07, and YR09, but once I got this combo, I switched to this one because I just think it looks a little more realistic. The other combo is a little too bright for something that's supposed to be found in nature, or at least like a critter, I would say. You know, this combo has a little bit more of a brown undertone. It's just a little bit duller, and so I think it works better for this. The other combo is still a really great orange combo for like inanimate objects or maybe even flowers or something that's very vibrant. But this one I think just has a better tone for foxes. I would also use this combo for pumpkins. What else? Fall leaves, anything like that. So you might notice that I did his light source just a little bit different than some of the other critters, and that's because his face is turned just a little bit more forward. You can see both of his eyes. So I did put a little bit of darkness also on the right hand side, not a lot, and I think I only used the YR14, my mid-tone for that, and not the YR18. It really just depends. I'm also going to give him some little white socks on his hands and feet, just by omitting the color there and just kind of stopping with that YR12 before I get to that area. And again, because he is a bit of a larger image with that large bushy tail, I did break him down into 2 sections. Again, I did his body and then I went and did his tail separately. And for his tail, I'm keeping that shadow down at the bottom, and that is because there is less area for the light to hit in that space where it connects to the body. So there would definitely be a larger shadow there. For the white areas of his body, I'm using W00 and W1 just to add a little light shading so it's not so bland. You want the coloring to lift that image off the page, and having a little shadow is going to make the white areas look even brighter. And then I'm going to move on to my little bird, and I'm going to make it a bluebird. So again, you could do lots of different combos, but I'm using that same color that I used on the mole's skin for the belly. And then for the body, I'm going to use B21, B23, and B26. That B26 is pretty dark, so I'm just going to use a little bit of that. and then blend that out with the B23. I'm still going to leave a large white area, especially on his face, to keep that light for that B21. And I'll just go over the very edge of that pinky color on his belly, just to kind of help that blend in with the rest of him. And then I used E74 for the beak. So I'm going to trim these images out with the matching dies and then quickly put together the rest of the card. I didn't know if I should do this on screen or not, so you guys can let me know down in the comments in the future with these videos if you'd like me to finish the card on screen or just come back at the end and show you the finished card, and obviously I'll just stick with whatever the majority thinks is the best plan of action. So I stamped a sentiment on the front of the card in Lawn Fawn walnut ink. It didn't turn out straight, so I'm going to end up changing that later on. But on the inside of my card, I'm adding a little squirrel and the sentiment that says nuts about you and an acorn. And then for the front of the card, I'm using some slimline nature borders from Sunny Studio. And I'm using the cloud portion to make some bushes, so I'm going to glue that down flat to the card right under that sentiment. And then for the grassy border, I'm going to pop that up with foam tape, and I'm using Lawn Fawn's Noble Fir cardstock for the bushes and cilantro cardstock for the grass. I've laid out all of my images on my card front so I can get an idea of how I want to have them spaced out. Also, any areas that are going to go above that grassy border are going to need some foam tape so that they're popped up and supported, and any part of their body that's going to go below or on top of that grassy border, I'm going to use liquid glue. So I'm just going through them one by one and sticking those down now that I have them spaced out the way that I want them. So I would have loved to include a squirrel in this card because they are my favorite woodland critters, but I just couldn't make it fit when I laid everything out before the video. So I'll definitely have to do another woodland critter version. So let me know down in the comments what critters you would want to see in that video. I added the bird that I colored on screen in the top left corner, and then added an additional bird colored exactly the same on the deer's back. And then off screen I also colored a whole bunch of fall leaves and acorns from both of these stamp sets, and I'm going to use those to embellish my scene. And when I'm doing that, I just try to make sure that all of those colors are spread around the card and there aren't two leaves that are really close to the same color right next to each other. So you saw me swap one of those out as I felt like there were two that were just too similar next to each other, and I broke it up with one that was a little bit more different. And once I have all of the leaves spread out, I also have a couple of acorns. I have this one that's a cluster of two, and then I also have 3 little individual acorns. So I'm going to just add those here and there on the ground just to finish off the scene. And there was one little leaf that fell out of the dish and landed at the top left corner there next to the bird. And I didn't notice it right away, but once I did, I'll just add that last one. And then I still had to fix that crooked sentiment, so I re-stamped that onto a strip of white cardstock and trimmed that out with a Lawn Fawn Everyday Sentiments banner. And I'm going to glue that in place right over top of the other one. Just making sure that that is lined up straight with the spine so that it's on there correctly this time. And that is going to complete my card for today. There's a look at all of those colored critters. I hope that you got some good ideas for different Copic combinations that maybe you haven't tried, or that maybe you'd like to add to your collection to just build it up. So if you enjoyed this video and you'd like to see more in this series, please be sure to hit that thumbs up button and subscribe and ring that notification bell so you don't miss when I post. I do have new videos every Monday and Friday, and also sometimes on Wednesdays. And if you can't wait that long, here are 2 extra videos I thought might also interest you. You can click on either one of those to check them out. I hope you all have an amazing day. Bye-bye.